Kyle, welcome to the Leanpub launch video for Unwrapping Monads and Friends, shining light on functional programming's scariest concepts. I was wondering if you could take a moment just to talk to all of us a little bit about what your book is about and who it's for, and a little bit about yourself too.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I've been in the JavaScript space for 20 plus, almost 25 years now, and kind of most well known for having written the You Don't Know JS books in the JavaScript space. That's how a lot of people know me. But my real interest is actually the functional programming style. And I love to do that in JavaScript, which is in and of itself a bit heretical. Most functional programmers don't like JavaScript for that, but I actually think it's a great language for that. So another one of the books that I published through Leanpub was called Functional Like JavaScript. Did that, I think, 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. Anyway, this is kind of a follow-up to that. It's a small, shorter ebook, but it's a follow-up that digs even further into functional programming concepts, some of the kind of most intimidating parts of functional programming, I think, for most people because of all the heavy terminology. But it tries to do a really approachable distillation of that topic, and again, of course, in the context of JavaScript. So that's where that ebook comes from.
Yeah, I was really glad to see it pop up, and its origin was in a blog post.
Sort of. I designed a library for functional programming, specifically for monads, in JavaScript. I built this library a couple of years ago, and as part of building the library, I realized people are going to show up at the library and they might be interested, but they're not going to understand the concepts behind it because monads are not commonly used in JavaScript. So I set out to kind of write a sort of short explainer. And as I wrote more and more and more, and I edited it over the course of some weeks or months and went back and fixed things as I understood it better, it evolved over the course of, say, 3 or 4 months into what I didn't even realize how long it had gotten, but it had gotten over 11,000 words, which is what found out just recently. So it was quite long, but I had called it the expansive intro to monads. It was just it's not really a blog post per se, but a guide that I put on that library so that anybody who found the library, if they wanted to understand the concepts, had a place to go and read. And so that was all a couple years back that I had done that. And then recently I've been starting to think about alternative ways of doing writing that weren't maybe quite so heavy handed as some of my previous self-publishing. And I thought to myself, like what have I written that's substantial enough in length that it would justify itself as an ebook as opposed to, a couple of pages from a blog post or something. I was like, what have I written that's substantial? And this guide came to mind, and I had kind of always wanted a better way of marketing it, so it kind of felt right. So yeah, I took the content from there pretty much untouched. I did a little bit of polish, but pretty much untouched, and dropped it into this multi-chapter short ebook. It landed at a little over 40 pages, so it's a pretty short ebook. But yeah, that's the origin story for this, is that it was a guide, and now it's also an ebook. Stays a guide, so you can still read it there, but kind of the main emphasis of putting it into ebook form is actually having a singular asset that somebody can download and read offline. It's almost like you're selling a reading experience. That's kind of how I've always justified every book that I write. Is always the content is out there for free, but what I'm selling is not the content, I'm selling the reading experience. So that's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, that's really great. That's a sort of classic example of the kind of book we love to see. We love to see appear on Leanpub. Uh, Leanpub's book generators partly use Haskell, and so when we're interviewing or hiring people for the book generator kind of positions, one of the questions we always ask them is, "What's a monad?" And sometimes this might be someone who's just finished their first year of university. Someone might be someone with more experience. But so instead of asking you what's a monad, which people should buy the book or get it for free if you want to, you can get it for free too. But
Yeah,
what would I use if I'm a programmer? What would I use a monad to do?
good question. I will partly answer the question that you skipped over about what it is by saying that, at least from the perspective that I take when I teach and explain these, a monad is a pattern for adding behavior to the values that we would already use and interact with in our programs. It's adding a specific kind of behavior that allows that value, whether that value is a number or whether it's some operational logic, like print something to the screen. In an abstract sense, a value can be any of those things and anywhere in between. But it's saying take that value and give it some behaviors, and the behaviors that you're giving it is that other values that have those same behaviors, these things fit together like really well designed Lego pieces. Whereas the values, if just the number 42 and some string and some function, they don't fit together. You have to do a lot of extra work. So a monad is a way of representing those things in a mathematically sound way that gives us a set of guarantees about how they're going to compose, how they're going to interact with each other. So in a program, one of the things that one of the classic examples of why might I use a monad in a program is we have this constant problem. No matter what language you have this constant problem of, do I have a value or am I missing a value? The concept of a value being affirmatively present or being empty, missing in some way. And different languages have different concepts of that. JavaScript actually has two. It has null and undefined, which is doubly annoying. But you almost always have the concept of a value that is either affirmatively present or it's missing. And for missing values, you have this tendency to kind of spider through an entire program that's dealing with that value, a whole set of guards around it, like if the value's not missing, then try to access it and format it and do something else with it. But if it is missing, just skip over it or provide a default or something like that. So we're kind of constantly checking ourselves to make sure, are we in the present case or in the missing case? Well, the maybe monad is, and it's sometimes referred to as the optional monad, is kind of taking that pattern and codifying it. What if we could represent that value in such a way that the encapsulation of is it there or not is hidden inside of the data structure? And so you would do the same operation against it, whether it was present or not. And in the case where it's not, it's sort of a no-op. It just skips over the operation. That simplifies all of the places where you deal with such values because you don't need those if statements propagated all the way throughout. It's kind of like collecting them all into the definition of the data structure. So that's one example. There are many others, but we deal with these problems with data and representation of data and side effects and error handling. These are all things that no matter what language you use, you have those concepts, and the language provides you a set of, we'll call them imperative constructs, like an if statement or a try-catch block or whatever. Monads have come along and said, what if we can represent those things a bit more rigidly and a bit more mathematically, and we can guarantee that this type of value put together with this type of value, they're going to have a very predictable outcome. That's why I think monads are so helpful. It's kind of it's a way of being more disciplined about our code so that we have more assurance that there's a whole lot of things that just can't happen with our program, a whole lot of bugs that just cannot happen because we took the time to be disciplined about how we represented our values. So to me, that's the real benefit of going in this direction.
Yeah, I got to say that's a really good explanation, and really like what you said at the end there about, like, if you were trying to justify to say your boss, why do I need to learn about this? It's like, because once I do it, we will systematically have fewer bugs in my
Right.
program going forward, right? And so, like, it takes time to learn it, it takes time to implement it, but at the end, you're not just going to have something that's kind of academically more sophisticated. You're going to have something that is practically much more kind of stable and predictable, if I understand.
Yeah, it's very similar to the same arguments that people make for going towards static typing. The JavaScript world has moved in mass to TypeScript because they want more predictability and more assurance over how their programs will work. I don't necessarily agree that TypeScript is getting them there, but that's, most of the industry believes that's true. So if you believe that's true, then the exact same argument leads you down the path of, well, what could functional programming do for me to also take some of these problems that I regularly encounter and just make them not even possible to represent in the program.
Just before I let you go, speaking of not necessarily agreeing with things, you're pretty open about your opinions wherever you post online. So where can people find you online today?
Yeah, I'm mostly on LinkedIn, and I know that's also kind of taboo. A lot of people don't like it, but I've carved out a pretty, I think, good and respectful and kind of active space of people that follow me around LinkedIn. and I found that to be a much safer place for social media. I still have a presence on Twitter/X, which, by the way, I'm trying to get this out. I heard somebody call it Twixter. I think that's the new name for it. So I still have a presence on Twixter. It's Getify X is my handle. But mostly I post snark there. My substantive stuff, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can search for Getify or Kyle Simpson on LinkedIn and find me there.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Kyle, the book is Unwrapping Monads and Friends, Shining Light on Functional Programming's Scariest Concepts. You can find it on Leanpub. Thank you very much, Kyle, for taking the time out of your day to talk to me and to talk to all of us about your really great book.
Thank you a lot. Appreciate it.